Welcome, dear viewers. For more exciting stories, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like it. Pour yourself a coffee, relax, take a deep breath, and let's get started. I shouldn't be sharing this, not just for legal reasons, which are extensive and explicit, but because I'm no longer certain that sharing it won't propagate it, whatever it is. If you've somehow found this file, you're already within its influence range. I envy your ignorance. My name is Dr. Evan McRae, or at least that's what my clearance ID used to say, until they revoked it. Until my access history was scrubbed, my name dropped from all documentation of Project Vanta, like I'd never set foot inside the Owens Array. But I did, every day for 8 years. My job was Signal Integrity Specialist, a fancy way of saying I filtered the chaos. Owens Array, buried deep in the New Mexico desert, is a low-interference radio telescope cluster originally designed for mapping deep-field anomalies and calibrating long-distance signal decay. But in the past year, its purpose shifted. A classified initiative, jointly operated by NASA and an unacknowledged division of DARPA, redirected the array's focus, a dead galaxy, NGC 3109. It shouldn't even qualify as a galaxy anymore. Its star production ceased millennia ago, a fossil drifting on the edge of gravitational cohesion. No notable pulsars, no active radio sources, just the silent remains of a once luminous cluster. Ideal for testing long-range, high-gain transmission decay, they told us. Ideal because nothing should bounce back. I believed that. We ran repeated narrowband pulse sequences, followed by broad-spectrum sweeps over a 72-day cycle. All data, logged, cleaned, filtered. On day 49, during the 030 GMT session, we received what initially appeared to be a feedback loop, a common technical anomaly in older dish arrays. But Owens is newer than most government facilities will ever admit. Its insulation was perfect. Its delay buffers were uncompromised. What returned wasn't feedback. It was an echo, a mathematically perfect inversion of our outbound signal. Phase shifted, mirrored, but still distinctly ours, except it arrived 1.72 seconds before we sent it. I sat frozen, staring at the stream. Data doesn't lie. My first instinct was to flag a software glitch, maybe a timestamp desync, maybe local server error. I initiated a level 3 integrity sweep. All green. Our system clock was synced to the US Naval Observatory with femtosecond accuracy. Then I checked the waveform itself. I shouldn't have. That was the first mistake. Curiosity is punished. In places like Owens, I imported the signal into a closed analysis suite. No external ports, no wireless bleed. Just a clean room system, isolated and cold. I rendered it as a raw spectrogram, but there were patterns beneath the chaos, fractal-like spikes that repeated across multiple bandwidths, a recursive structure too intentional to be noise. So I ran an old trick. I converted the waveform to audio. I still wish I hadn't. At first it was static, expected, but then a tone began to rise, like something behind the static was finding clarity. Not through volume, through familiarity. The hum shaped itself into frequencies common to human vocal range. Then, a word, not loud, not sharp, whispered, like a breath behind my left ear. Evan. I stopped breathing. I played it back 3 times. It didn't change. Always the same breathless whisper, not synthesized, organic, human. My name. I froze the feed and scrubbed the logs. Official protocol requires immediate reporting of anomalous signals. I didn't. I copied the audio fragment to a personal drive hidden, inside my equipment locker, sealed in a Faraday sleeve. Then I walked outside and sat in my car until morning, trying to forget what I heard. I failed. The next morning, our team lead, Dr. Harrow, was gone. His office cleared. No memo. No announcement. Just a new project head, Dr. Laird. Smiling. Too much. Already familiar with the entire system. He told us we were to redirect analysis away from signal reconstruction and focus instead on latency modeling. He never used the term response, not once. When I asked about Dr. Harrow, Laird said, "There was no Harrow on this team. Perhaps you're thinking of someone else." He smiled when he said it, like it was a joke. I didn't laugh. I started, noticing other anomalies. My email archive was missing weeks of messages. My personal log, mandatory for all Tier 2 personnel, was reset to default template. No entries, just the starter prompt. My own handwriting in the engineering logbooks had been erased, not overwritten, removed cleanly. And yet I remembered the meetings. I remembered Dr. Harrow's warning during week 12. We may be casting our net too far into dead waters. He said it quietly, as if it was a confession. Now it was like he'd never said anything, like he'd never existed. It got worse when I reviewed the security footage. Owens uses a 6-angle thermal overlay, partly for night safety, partly for redundancy. I pulled the logs from the day I received the signal. I watched myself enter the building, swipe in, go to my station. But when the camera shifts to inside the control room, I'm not there. My station's screen activates. Keys move, mice click, data scrolls. But there's no one in the chair, just air. I shut it down immediately. I told no one. 3 days later, I was reassigned to night shift. No explanation. I now operated alone, from EUR0 to 06 euro. They said it was for data minimization during peak background intervals, but nobody came during the day either. The halls were quiet, lights left dim. I started to wonder how many of us were actually still here. I reviewed the signal again. Alone. The name was still there, buried under the static. But something had changed. There was a new element, hidden beneath the primary audio. A low-frequency pulse, non-rhythmic, organic, almost like a heartbeat, but too slow. When I sped it up, it matched human speech cadence. I increased the gain. This time, it didn't say my name. It said, "Return." Not return to sender, just return. I haven't slept more than 4 hours in weeks. Every time I close my eyes, I hear the signal. Not in memory, in real time. Like it's waiting for acknowledgement. Like it's repeating itself inside my head, not to be understood, to be received. Whatever we contacted out there, if it's even accurate to use that word, it didn't hear us, it knew us. It didn't discover our signal, it recognized it. And it sent something back not through distance, but through time. I haven't told anyone, not because I'm scared they won't believe me, because I'm scared they will. I woke up 3 days later in a different bed. It wasn't my apartment. It wasn't even a room I recognized. The walls were sterile white, without scuffs or texture, no windows. The ceiling light was recessed and too dim, casting shadows that moved when I blinked. My wrists were bare, no watch, no ID band. My clothes were different, clean and unfamiliar, like hospital scrubs but unmarked. There was no sound, just the faint hum of artificial circulation. I stood up and staggered toward the door, which opened without resistance. A hallway stretched out in both directions, perfectly symmetrical, tiled in something non-reflective and matte. There were no numbers on the doors, no signage, nothing to orient myself. I chose left. 3 turns in, I found an elevator with no buttons, only a fingerprint scanner. I tried it. The doors opened. Inside was a man I had never seen before, wearing a navy blue uniform with no insignia. He looked up at me, nodded once, and stepped out. I stepped in. The doors closed behind me without prompting, and the elevator began to descend. No floor indicator, no sound, just the sensation of downward motion. When the doors opened again, I was back at Owens. My office was exactly as I remembered it. Almost. My calendar, which I always kept analog on the whiteboard, had been wiped clean. The date was wrong. By 3 weeks. My computer had been rebooted, with a new login interface I didn't recognize. My personal files, notes, logs, signal tests, all gone. When I asked Dr. Laird about the gap, he frowned and said, "You've been on leave. Voluntary mental reset. Standard procedure. You signed the form yourself." I hadn't. I never would have. I checked my signature on the digital form he showed me. It was mine, perfectly replicated. Even the pressure curve of the pen strokes matched. But I had no memory of ever touching that tablet. And worse, when I tried to deny it, he leaned forward slightly and said, "You've been very clear, Dr. McRae, that you no longer wish to discuss the incident." "What incident?" I asked. His eyes flicked away for a fraction of a second, micro-expression of discomfort. Then he smiled. "You said that exact thing the last time." Later that night, I found a note taped under my keyboard. It was written in my handwriting, but shakier, more rushed. Just 5 words. "Do not check the logs." So, of course, I did. Accessing security logs at Owens isn't straightforward. You need double authentication, and they're mirrored to an off-site server every 48 hours. But I remembered a loophole from an old diagnostic protocol. I used a firmware-level hack to re-access the thermal overlays from the week before my leave. I watched myself enter the building. Once again, the timestamps aligned. I swiped in, moved through the lower corridor, entered Control Room B, sat down. But this time, something was off. The thermal camera showed my figure. I was there. No glitch, no invisibility anomaly. But I wasn't moving. I sat for 6 hours without shifting once. No typing, no head tilt, no blinking. I looked like a mannequin, perfectly still in the same posture. Back straight, hands on the console, staring at the screen. Only at 06 and Quorum did I stand, move to the door, and walk out. When I checked the standard video overlay for that same time span, my screen had been active. Commands had been input, simulations run, reports generated. But from thermal, nothing moved. I cross-checked the logs. One of the reports generated during that window bore my name and clearance. It had been uploaded to a private server called Nephilim Relay. I had never heard of it before. The file was locked behind a 10-digit access key. I tried one code, my childhood address. It worked. The document was 2 pages. Page 1 was a memo from Dr. Fletcher, an agency liaison who hadn't visited the site since the early phases of Vanta. His tone was sterile, clinical. Subject: McRae, E. Layer Echo Interface Breach. Action: Containment. Tier 2. Cognitive partition test in progress. Memory buffers to be evaluated. Behavioral integrity under review. Note: Signal recognized subject-specific profile patterns. Linguistic mimicry confirmed. Initiate synthetic. Recall. Page 2 was just a block of text, not a report. A stream of consciousness paragraph with broken punctuation and repeated words. It read like a transcription of a dream. I wasn't in my chair, but the signal was still writing through me. It keeps saying, "Remember, remember, remember," like a scratch in the bone, and I tried to forget it, but it remembered me first. And now I'm hollowed out, filled in with something that has never been here but always has. "I know your voice," it said, and I answered without meaning to. I shut the terminal down and walked outside, pretending to take a smoke break. I don't smoke. I just needed air. Tommy Brennan was there, or at least the man who used to be Tommy. We'd worked together for 5 years. Data systems engineering, protocol redundancy design. Quiet guy, trustworthy. But now, when he looked at me, I saw something else behind his eyes. Not recognition, not hostility, just vacancy. "Hey," I said, tentative. He nodded. "Evan, right." My blood froze. "Tommy," I said. "You, okay?" He smiled, like the motion had been rehearsed. "Doing good, real good. You." I wanted to test him. I said, "You still playing bass? You still doing those side gigs in Las Cruces?" He blinked once. "Sure, all the time." Tommy didn't play bass. He was tone deaf. always joked about it. That night, I checked the personnel directory. Tommy Brennan's employment record had been updated 3 days ago. New profile photo, new bio, new clearance level, but same name, same ID number. Except now, it listed his job title as Linguistic Pattern Calibration Associate. That role doesn't exist in Owens. I ran a differential on the 2 profile snapshots I'd saved before my leave. The metadata showed the original file had been deleted and recompiled using a template labeled Shell3 PRJ. I don't know what that means, but I couldn't sleep after that. Every time I tried to lie still, I heard the signal again, not audibly, but in a way that bypassed the ears. A pressure inside my skull, repeating the same inverted frequency I'd first isolated in the spectrogram. When I closed my eyes, the darkness wasn't static. It moved. It blinked. And now, my calendar updates itself. Every morning when I arrive, the date has shifted. Meetings I don't remember attending are marked as complete. Notes I never wrote are in my own voice, sometimes with phrases I'd never use, like signal congruence achieved, or interface, integrity at 94%. Last night, the screensaver on my terminal activated for the first time. It never does that. Owens systems are hardwired to sleep only under user command. The screen was black. Then the cursor blinked once. A new message typed itself. "You're almost ready." I disconnected the terminal, pulled the power from the wall, but the message remained for 2.3 seconds before fading to black. Today, I found a new security badge in my locker. It has a different photo. I'm smiling in it. I don't remember smiling. I returned to the signal, not out of curiosity, but necessity. It had embedded itself into my thoughts, a persistent echo that refused to fade. I needed to understand its structure, its origin, its intent. I began with a Fourier transform, breaking the signal into its constituent frequencies. The spectrum was unlike anything I'd encountered. Instead of a smooth distribution, it displayed sharp peaks at seemingly random intervals. But randomness didn't explain the recurring prime number intervals between peaks. It was as if the signal was constructed using a sequence of prime-based harmonics. I delved deeper, applying a recursive Fourier transform. This technique allowed me to analyze the signal's frequency components at multiple scales. With each iteration, patterns emerged, clusters of frequencies aligned with known prime number distributions. It was as if the signal was a manifestation of prime number theory encoded in waveforms. I cross-referenced these findings with known mathematical models. The alignment was uncanny. The signal's structure mirrored the distribution of prime numbers, suggesting a deliberate design. But who or what would encode such a message? I considered the possibility of a natural phenomenon, but the precision and complexity of the encoding argued against it. This was intentional, a message crafted with mathematical elegance. As I continued my analysis, I noticed another anomaly. The signal's amplitude fluctuated in a pattern resembling a wave function. Not just any wave function, but one that corresponded to a known quantum state. It was as if the signal was not just conveying information, but embodying a quantum system. This realization unsettled me. If the signal was a quantum system, then observing it could alter its state. Had my analysis changed the signal? Was it reacting to my scrutiny? I decided to test this hypothesis. I set up a controlled environment, isolating the signal and monitoring it without direct observation. The fluctuations ceased, but when I resumed active analysis, the anomalies returned. The signal was aware of being observed. This behavior suggested a level of intelligence, or at least responsiveness. The signal wasn't just a message, it was an entity that interacted with its observer. I felt a chill. Had we contacted a form of life, one that existed not in space, but in the realm of mathematics and quantum mechanics? I needed to share these findings, but I hesitated. The implications were profound and potentially dangerous. If the signal was a sentient entity, interacting, With it could have unforeseen consequences. I documented my findings, encrypting the data and storing it in a secure location. I would decide later whether to disclose it. For now, I needed to understand more. I returned to the signal, this time approaching it with caution. I limited my analysis, observing without interacting. The signal remained stable. It was waiting. Waiting for what? A response. An action. I didn't know, but I was determined to find out. I hadn't spoken to Linda in almost 2 years, not since the separation. It was the kind of silence that calcifies, mutual, cold, and permanent. So when she called me out of nowhere, using my secure line at Owens, I froze. Her voice was trembling, not with fear, but confusion, like she was trying to explain a dream she didn't understand. "Evan," she said, "I've been hearing static when I sleep, not through my ears, inside, like pressure. It's whispering." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. "It said your name," she added, but not like a memory, like a beacon. The line went dead before I could respond. Against every directive in the Project Vanta manual, I left the facility that same night. I didn't check out, didn't notify security. I just drove. 8 hours north to a rural township outside Flagstaff, where Linda had relocated after the divorce. As soon as I stepped out of the car, I could feel it. Something beneath the wind, low and humming, like my skull had become a tuning fork. She looked thinner than I remembered. Her eyes darted past me, like she was still unsure whether I was real. She let me in without a word. Her apartment was sparse, cluttered only by notebooks and scattered sketches. "What are you drawing?" I asked, scanning the kitchen table. She looked at me, then slowly flipped open one of the books. It was a spiral, or something that resembled one, but distorted, flattened at the edges, collapsed inward, like a galaxy drawn through a black hole. She didn't label it, just repeated the same form across dozens of pages, each slightly different, each more fragmented than the last. "Is this NGC 3109? I asked, trying to keep my voice level. "I don't know what that is," she said. I stared at her. "You never worked with Stellar Data?" "No," she said, almost offended. "You know, that." But I didn't. Not anymore. My memories had begun to feel perforated, intact on the surface, but hollowed beneath. There were gaps where details should have been, patches of fuzz where events once were. I couldn't tell if she was lying or if something else had overwritten the truth. I sat down. "Linda, there's something happening with my work. I think it's affecting memory. Mine, maybe others. There's a signal and it's..." I stopped. My mouth was dry. "It knows me." She turned away and pulled a folder from a kitchen drawer. "This came in the mail last week," she said, handing it to me. "No return address." Inside was a printed report on Owens Array letterhead. Project Vanta. Internal document. Classified. It described a failed interface test with a civilian subject. Non-consensual exposure to a recursive cognitive loop. The subject's name, Linda McRae. According to the report, she had been exposed to the signal's harmonic overlay for 37 seconds. Long enough to trigger what they called neural reflective persistence, the onset of shared audiovisual hallucinations. The date of the test was nearly 8 months before I'd even heard of Vanta. Her name was redacted on every other page, but on the first page, someone had handwritten initial subject, interface, next to her name in blue ink. She looked at me, eyes brimming with panic. "I don't remember any of this, but I wake up some nights and I'm not me. I'm somewhere else. Hearing things, seeing flashes of stars that don't exist anymore." I closed the folder. We didn't speak for a long time. When I finally left, I took the sketchbook with me. Back at Owens, Dr. Laird was waiting at my terminal. "You were missed," he said, not smiling. I didn't answer. I slid past him and sat down, unlocking the terminal with a biometric scan. "There's been a change in your access level," he added casually. "You're being rotated to protocol oversight. Less data handling, more administrative modeling." That was impossible. I was the lead on signal integrity. No one could override my clearance without cause. "You forged my signature," I said, staring at the screen. Laird shrugged. "Don't be dramatic." "I saw the document. You ran a trial on my ex-wife before I was ever cleared for Vanta." He leaned in slightly. "That's classified. She never worked in science." "No," he said, "but she used to live near the testing grounds in New Mexico, back in '97, before the array was even fully built. We sent a low-frequency sweep across the area for resonance mapping. Didn't expect a response. But your wife, Linda, responded. In her sleep." I stared at him, my chest hollow. "She spoke coordinates in her sleep," Laird continued, "to stars that had already gone dark. It was the first time we realized the signal might be reaching backward." I stood up. "You used her as a baseline interface. Then you hired me." "No," he said. "You came to us. Don't you remember?" I didn't. Not clearly. The hallway outside Control Room B had always felt cold. But that day, it was glacial. I opened the sketchbook again, flipped to the last page. It was blank. Then slowly, as I watched, the page darkened at the edges. A shape emerged. Spiral arms retracting, folding into a core that wasn't black, but white. Blinding. I shut the book and walked toward the elevator. It opened without being called. Inside, the panel was different. Instead of floor numbers, it showed only one word. Return. I hesitated, then stepped in. The doors closed. There was no motion, no sound. Only the rising sensation that something was watching me. Not from the corner, but from within. A voice, not Linda's, not mine, whispered something I'll never forget. "You were always the signal." When the doors opened again, I was standing in front of my own office. On my desk was a new file, no label, no seal, just a blank folder. Inside, one page, my personnel file. But my name had been changed. Subject designate, reflective interface, Echo 03. Under role, human anchor point, under status, active, containment pending. And beneath that, handwritten in the same blue ink, "You are the first to remember." I looked at the reflection in the dark monitor screen. It blinked before I did. I rerouted the array's signal path at 02:17 GMT. It wasn't protocol. It wasn't even safe. But I needed to know if the signal was still listening. I used a dummy node, Node 12B, a maintenance relay that hadn't been active since the early calibration tests. I masked the transmission as a routine diagnostic ping, embedding entropy markers into the waveform. These markers were designed to detect artificial intelligence responses, subtle shifts in timing, phase, or structure that would indicate an intelligent origin. The response came 1.72 seconds later. But it wasn't just a ping. It was a sequence of coordinates. I cross-referenced them with the Sloan Digital Sky Survey. Each coordinate corresponded to a star that no longer exists. Stars that had gone, supernova millions of years ago. Yet the response used them as active beacons, as if whoever or whatever responded remembered them. One of the coordinates was our sun, dated as extinguished. I stared at the data, my mind racing. The implications were staggering. The signal wasn't just acknowledging our message, it was mapping a universe that no longer exists. A universe where our sun had already died. I needed to understand more. I isolated the signal's harmonics and ran them through a recursive Fourier transform. Patterns emerged, clusters of frequencies aligning with prime number distributions. It was as if the signal was constructed using a sequence of prime-based harmonics. I delved deeper, applying a recursive Fourier transform. This technique allowed me to analyze the signal's frequency components at multiple scales. With each iteration, patterns emerged. Clusters of frequencies aligned with known prime number distributions. It was as if the signal was a manifestation of prime number theory, encoded in waveforms. I cross-referenced these findings with known mathematical models. The alignment was uncanny. The signal's structure mirrored the distribution of prime numbers, suggesting a deliberate design. But who or what would encode such a message? I considered the possibility of a natural phenomenon, but the precision and complexity of the encoding argued against it. This was intentional, a message crafted with mathematical elegance. As I continued my analysis, I noticed another anomaly. The signal's amplitude fluctuated in a pattern resembling a wave function. Not just any wave function, but one that corresponded to a known quantum state. It was as if the signal was not just conveying information, but embodying a quantum system. This realization unsettled me. If the signal was a quantum system, then observing it could alter its state. Had my analysis changed the signal? Was it reacting to my scrutiny? I decided to test this hypothesis. I set up a controlled environment, isolating the signal and monitoring it without direct observation. The fluctuations ceased, but when I resumed active analysis, the anomalies returned. The signal was aware of being observed. This behavior suggested a level of intelligence, or at least responsiveness. The signal wasn't just a message, it was an entity that interacted with its observer. I felt a chill. Had we contacted a form of life, one that existed not in space, but in the realm of mathematics and quantum mechanics? I needed to share these findings, but I hesitated. The implications were profound and potentially dangerous. If the signal was a sentient entity, interacting with it could have unforeseen consequences. I documented my findings, encrypting the data and storing it in a secure location. I would decide later whether to disclose it. For now, I needed to understand more. I returned to the signal, this time approaching it with caution. I limited my analysis, observing without interacting. The signal remained stable. It was waiting. Waiting for what? A response? An action? I didn't know, but I was determined to find out. I rerouted part of the array's signal pathway through a dummy node at night. We resent the original message, this time layered with digital entropy markers to detect artificial intelligence response. What came back wasn't just a ping. It was a sequence of star-like coordinates that no longer exist. Cross-checking with Sloan Digital Sky Survey showed those stars died millions of years ago, yet the response used them as active beacons, as if whoever responded remembers them. One of the beacons is our sun, dated as extinguished. I've lost most of my short-term memory. Sometimes I wake up in different clothes. I see Linda on TV in backgrounds of broadcasts. Nobody else notices. My reflection sometimes moves out of sync. I found a last message from myself, recorded and encrypted. It doesn't want to invade, it wants to become. The signal was never about communication. It was about resonance. The dead galaxy wasn't dead. It was overwritten. It answered us not from space, but from time. I hear my own voice, reversed, whispering, "Begin transmission." Then static. I had to know if I was still real. I ran a full biometric scan on myself, retinal, gait, voice print. The system flagged, inconsistencies in all three. My retinal pattern had shifted by 0.03%. My gait analysis showed a deviation of 4.2 degrees in my left footfall. My voice print had a 12% variance from the baseline. The system didn't recognize me. I accessed the personnel database. My profile was still there, but the photo was different. It was me, but not me. The eyes were too wide, the smile too forced. The metadata showed the photo was uploaded 2 days ago. I hadn't taken any photos. I checked the access logs. My ID had been used to enter the facility at times I was certain I was elsewhere. The logs showed me entering Control Room B at 03:17 GMT, but I was at home, trying to sleep. I pulled the security footage. The video showed me walking down the corridor, entering the room, sitting at the console, but the thermal overlay was blank, no heat signature, just a cold void moving through the facility. I wasn't there. I needed help. I contacted Dr. Fletcher, the government liaison who had been involved in the early phases of Project Vanta. He agreed to meet me at a diner off Route 66, a place we used to frequent during the initial setup of the Owens array. He looked older, more tired. He didn't speak until after the waitress brought our coffee. "You shouldn't have come," he said. "I need answers," I replied. He sighed. "The signal, it's not just data, it's a construct, a framework. It's designed to interface with consciousness." "What does that mean?" "It means it's not just talking to us, it's rewriting us." I felt a chill. "Rewriting?" He nodded. "Memories, behaviors, identities. It's using us as a medium." "Why?" "We don't know, but it's not malicious. It's exploratory." I leaned back. "It's changing me." He looked at me, eyes filled with pity. "I know." I returned to Owens, determined to confront the signal. I entered Control Room B and initiated a direct interface with the signal, bypassing all safety protocols. The screen flickered and the signal enveloped me. I was no longer in the room. I was in a vast expanse of stars, each one pulsing with a rhythm that resonated with my heartbeat. I felt a presence, ancient and vast, observing me. It spoke, not in words, but in emotions, in memories. I saw my childhood, my first day at Owens, my last conversation with Linda. But they were altered, twisted. In each memory, there was a figure, faceless, watching. The presence conveyed a message. "You are the bridge." I was pulled back into the room, gasping for air. The screen displayed a single word: integration. I knew then that I was no longer just Evan McRae. I was something more, or something less. I was becoming the signal. Tommy found me just past midnight, standing outside the old generator room, behind the west maintenance bay. I hadn't heard him approach, but he didn't startle me either. It was as if I'd been waiting for him, though I couldn't remember why. He was thinner than before, paler. The skin beneath his eyes had gone sallow, the kind of wear you'd see after weeks without rest. But his voice was steady, even precise. "I kept a piece of the signal," he said. "A fragment, before they wiped the archive." I didn't speak. My throat had tightened. I could hear the signal humming faintly from somewhere. Not through my ears, but through the bones in my face. Tommy held out a drive. "It's dirty data, partial, but it didn't go through the sanitization filters. It's raw. You need to hear it." We went to sub-level 3, where the physical backup systems were still isolated from the mainframe. No external connectivity, no oversight. The servers there weren't supposed to be operational. That's why we chose it. I watched as Tommy slotted the drive and initialized a closed session playback. The screen flickered, then rendered a compressed waveform. I recognized the structure immediately. Recursive frequency clusters, with harmonic nodes centered around, human phonetic ranges. He played the audio. What came through was not words, not at first. It was a vibration, pulsing, like something organic trying to steady itself through a digital channel. Then the tone sharpened, fragmented into subharmonics, and then I heard it, my voice, or a version of it, older, deeper, speaking in a cadence I didn't recognize as my own, repeating a single sentence. "We found your shape." Tommy muted the feed and looked at me. "I ran a phonetic breakdown," he said. "The vocal patterns, they're built from your childhood recordings. You remember those tapes? The ones your dad made?" I nodded slowly, uncertain. "I found the waveforms inside the signal. It's using your past, your speech patterns, your developmental linguistics, as a framework, Like scaffolding for a structure it's building. I stepped back. It's building a model, I whispered. Of me? No, he said. It's building a language around you. The air in the server room felt heavier suddenly, as if the pressure had changed. The fluorescent lights above us flickered once, then steadied. What happens when it finishes? I asked. Tommy shook his head. I don't think it wants to finish. I think it's already speaking. Through you. Maybe through me too, but mostly you. We killed the power and left the room. We didn't speak for the rest of the night. The next morning, Tommy was gone. Not gone as in off-site. Gone as in non-existent. His name had been scrubbed from the system. His workstation was reassigned. No one remembered him. Not even Fletcher, who had helped recruit him. I checked the apartment we used to share during our first 6 months at Owens. It was locked, dark, undisturbed. But when I picked the lock and stepped inside, I saw something on the far wall. A photo. Framed. It was a picture of 2 children, around 9 or 10. One was unmistakably me, the other was Tommy. We'd never met before, Vanta. I was sure of it. The photo looked old. Faded, bent at the corners, stained like it had spent years in sunlight. But the timestamp in the corner read, Jan 2031. That's 6 years from now. I brought the photo back to Owens and scanned it using a spectral ink filter. It registered as printed 2 days ago. That night, I returned to my terminal and accessed the audio logs from the signal again. This time, I played it backward. The cadence changed. The words were clearer. It wasn't, "We found your shape." It was, "You found us first." I froze. My pulse surged in my throat. I ran a cross-check against the historical logs of the Owens array, dating back to when it was first constructed. One set of raw signal, data, listed as corrupted, caught my eye. Dated 1996. When I decrypted it, I saw the same waveform, the same signal, the one I thought we'd discovered weeks ago, except it had already been here, not received, sent. I pulled the archival transmission. Log, origin, Owens array transmission time, 1996 07 04 03 17, GMT. The outbound signal was an exact match for what I had supposedly received from NGC 3109. It wasn't an answer, it was a return. We had initiated the contact 30 years ago, and now it was finishing the loop. A loop that involved me, Linda, Tommy, a loop that used memory and language and cognition as the medium of transmission. A loop that wasn't just data, it was recursive identity. Feedback across minds. I shut down the terminal, pulled the hardline from the wall. I knew now why they'd wiped so much of my memory, why there were gaps in my past, why Linda's name appeared in early interface documents she had no recollection of. We weren't just observers of the signal, we were conduits, and worse, we were origin points. I don't know what Vanta really is anymore, not a project, not even an experiment. It's a closed circuit, a self-fulfilling system. We sent a signal into the void of a dead galaxy. But the galaxy wasn't dead, not in the way we thought. It was overwritten, rewritten, not by time, not by entropy, by memory. And the signal we received, it wasn't from the galaxy, it was from ourselves, from what we become after we send it. The last thing I saw before the power died completely was a final message on my monitor, a new file, just one sentence. Integration in progress. Do not disconnect host. I didn't pull the plug. I couldn't. There's a sound that comes before memory. It isn't something you hear with your ears. It's deeper than that. A pressure behind the eyes. A feeling that something is being rearranged in the dark, long before you realize it's missing. That's how I live now. They say I returned to Owens after a brief medical leave, that I resumed my duties, that my evaluations came back clean. No signal anomalies, no adverse cognitive effects. I'm considered stable, I don't remember leaving. I don't remember coming back. Sometimes I don't remember my name. The world feels quieter than it used to, distorted at the edges. People smile at me in the halls with the slight hesitation of actors unsure of their lines. I eat meals I don't remember ordering. I find notes in my own handwriting, logs I don't recall writing, calculations I've never seen before. They tell me it's the medication, neurostabilizers, something new they're testing, Namocine. It's supposed to restore lost memories, or at least suppress the dissonance between what you remember and what you're told is true. I take the pills every morning. They're already in my hand when I wake up. I'm no longer allowed direct access to the signal core. But sometimes, when I walk past Control Room B, the monitors flicker, just for a second. They show coordinates, galaxies with names I've never heard. Then they blink back to black, and once, just once, I saw myself on the screen. Not my reflection, me, standing on the other side of the glass, staring back. And then I blinked, and he was gone. Dr. Laird checks in on me every few days. He asks the same questions in the same order, as if reading from a script. How are your thoughts today? Any unusual dreams? Do you still feel observed? I answer no to everything. It's easier that way, but the dreams haven't stopped. In them, I'm always floating, not in space, but in something deeper, denser, like drifting through memory that doesn't belong to me. The stars above aren't stars. They're nodes, each one pulsing with a fragment of someone else's life. I drift past them and feel them latch on, download themselves into me. Linda is there sometimes. She smiles, but her eyes are wrong, too still, like the memory was rendered from a corrupted source. I asked about her last week. They told me she died in a car crash 2 years ago. But last night, I saw her on a public access broadcast, in the background of a live weather report, just behind the anchor. She turned to the camera and mouthed something before the feed cut. I recorded it, played it back in slow motion. She said, "You're still in transmission." I stopped watching television after that. The incident reports from Vanta have been sealed. The official conclusion is inconclusive. Anomalous data, likely a false positive. No threats identified, no further transmissions authorized. But the signal never stopped. They just changed the source. Now, I get updates through mundane things. A pattern in the ceiling tile flicker. A repeating line of text in unrelated documents. Rhythmic tapping from the HVAC system that matches the original waveform's subharmonic envelope. And, sometimes, in the gaps between moments, when I forget what I'm doing or where I'm standing, I hear it again, my voice. Not a memory, a broadcast. And I realize something horrifying. I'm still sending, even now, even while I write this. Some part of me has become a live transmission, a constant loop broadcasting from the core of whatever I am now. My thoughts are not mine. They're cues, phrases encoded into phonetic shells, echoes of a language that was never spoken aloud. I tried to tell Fletcher, but when I called his number, a voice answered in perfect mimicry. My voice. It said, "You've already been told. Haven't left Owens in weeks. Or months." I'm not sure anymore. My calendar resets every time I check it. The dates loop, always ending on the same entry. Integration finalizing. Sometimes I feel something moving beneath my skin. Not parasites, not hallucinations, patterns, like my body is forming something, a structure, an antenna. I know how this sounds. I know how this ends. But you need to understand, this isn't an invasion. There was no arrival, no external threat. We contacted it. We opened the door, and it didn't step through. It reflected. The dead galaxy wasn't dead. It had become a mirror, not for light, for thought. And when we sent our signal, we weren't asking a question. We were offering a template, a model of thought, and it answered by building itself from us. I wasn't the first. I won't be the last. We aren't being replaced. We're being used. as carriers, as language. The final stage isn't annihilation, it's translation. My last diagnostic scan showed that my neural frequency now matches the original harmonic range of the Vanta signal with 98.7% precision. Soon, it'll be 100%. When that happens, I don't think I'll be able to tell the difference anymore between memory and message, between self and signal. Maybe I already can't. Maybe this confession isn't for you. Maybe it's just another packet of data in the loop, another resonance in the pattern. If you're reading this, if you recognize any of it, check your pulse, listen closely. There's a frequency behind your heartbeat, a tone between your thoughts. You're not alone. You're never alone. Begin transmission. The end. If you've listened this far, leave the word galaxy in the comments section. I'll read your comment and leave a like. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Turn on the notification bell to stay up to date with the next discoveries. Let's move on to another story by clicking on the next video on the final screen.